Good morning. Welcome to Awake and Aware 2011.
Is that the extent of your introduction?
Well, yeah, you said you wanted to start.
Okay,
so
I do, yes.
you.
First thing I said to Kerry this morning was get out of the way and let me do this one, please. Okay.
And I said, well, you still have to let me talk when you're done.
And the reason why I wanted to introduce Rich Dolan is like, Kerry, look, what you can do, you can introduce somebody else, but I want to introduce Rich. And the reason why I want
No, we're going to fight over this.
The reason why I want to introduce Rich is because he's my kind of guy. Okay. The reason why Rich is my kind of guy is because he's grounded, he's lucid, he's intelligent, he's measured, he's articulate, and he's given an enormous amount of thought to whatever it is he's going to tell us today. And I do not know what that is. But yesterday he gave us an intimation that he was going to present something new for us that may just be taking the lid off some of his unpublished speculations, conclusions, and thoughts about what really may be going on. And if Rich is going to share those with us, then I'm going to be in the front row listening to this. I do not think Rich is going to be telling us about a horde of spaceships following Elenin. I do not think Rich is going to be telling us about the fact that Elenin is hiding a brown dwarf that's going to crash into this planet at any moment. I think Rich has got something more subtle and important to share with us than that. And as I often say when people ask me about the kind of material that Kerry and I have been reporting for the last 5.5 years, there's a lot of crazy stuff out there, and some of it is true. Rich Dolan.
Thank you so much, Bill. Kerry, did you want to have a word?
Yeah. I'm going to say.
I never want to cut you off, Kerry.
Absolutely not. That would be dangerous. No, actually, I just want to say that I've known Rich even before Camelot, and he is just an amazing, amazing researcher, historian, and Rhodes Scholar.
Finalist.
Oh, finalist. Okay, but does it really matter, finalist? I mean, is this a race, right? So, the human race. That's an interesting term, isn't it? Anyway, let's just say that he's a really amazing researcher and historian, and leave it at that. But I do want to say that his books, UFOs in the National Security State, are the best documented evidence in a very methodical way of what's really going on this planet and how we're being visited on a daily basis, really, by craft from all kinds of places, including ones that we've built, okay, in the secret space program. So now, Rich Dolan.
Thanks. So to the audio people, should I use this microphone or do we have the lab? Both. We've got to use both. One thing I noticed is that last night I think I scared the hell out of all of you when I demanded that you be here at 8:30. I was in my dad raising teenagers mode, and it worked. It did very good. And I know because I helped close out the bar with most of you last night. So we did that very well. So we're all here with our water and coffee and anyway, this is California, so you've got your mocha, frappa, latte, chino, raspberry, whatever. What is that? We're from New York. I'm from New York, Brooklyn, actually, and they don't do the mocha, Starbucks, frappuccino. They drink coffee. It's a crazy thing there. Like mocha, frappa, what's up? Just drink your damn coffee. Shut the hell up while you're at it. I grew up with that. I think they said it out of love, but. This is the Rich Dolan stand-up comedy hour. Yes, you're here. No, we actually have some work to do. I have some work to do, and I'm going to take you along with me. I do have a very new, I don't want to say very new, there's some new things in here. As to how far it's going to go, well, let's just find out. We've got 90 minutes, and I'm going to I think I'll be able to get everything in. Let's give it a shot. My topic, I call it the ET reality, what it means for our world today and tomorrow. Let's take a little trip down memory lane into the 1940s. And once upon a time, Harry Truman had military advisors who told him, "Sir, we have recovered technology that is not of this world." And that's a pretty awesome thing to experience, isn't it, if you're Harry Truman? So you have to wonder, what would he do? What might he want to do? I've often wondered about this myself. I don't know if Harry Truman was truly a wonderful or evil guy. I think he, in his heart of hearts, had a lot of good things about him. And I think he might have thought to announce this reality to the rest of the world, but I think he would have thought better of it very, very quickly. The world in 1947, we often forget just how desperately weakened it was. I mean, after all, we had just gone through World War II, the most utterly titanic struggle, military struggle in modern history. In 1947, the world looked, kind of like that. That was rebuilding Europe and Japan, refugees, dislocated people. There was a lot that was in need of returning to normalcy. It's all people wanted. And then you had the other reality, which had come upon the world, which is the advent of nuclear atomic bombs. And to make matters even more difficult still, we had the early Cold War developing. And Harry Truman had all of these things on his mind. If we tell the world that there are these other beings, these other things, these other technologies, A, are we going to be having to share it with everyone else, like the Soviets? Probably didn't want to do that. How would it affect the world geopolitical situation? There's Uncle Joe. What a nice man he was. Not. There are a lot of other ramifications with telling the world that this phenomenon is real. And undoubtedly Truman and his people thought about this. Oil. Oil's at the center of all of this, I think. And oil, circa 1950 was big-time boom town. Oil was where it was at. We talk about free energy today, but let's not forget that in 1947, 1948, oil was about as close as you could get to free energy. It was cheap, for sure, relatively easy to transport. It gave a huge amount of BTUs. It was awesome. And it was creating the global infrastructure. It had been doing that, actually, for nearly a century by then. Oil was entrenched, and it wasn't simply the fact that you had moneyed interests at the top owning it. Yes, let's never forget that. But it was the fact that oil underlay the built infrastructure of the globe as it existed already, and it was growing. And in 1950 terms, it really did seem that oil was going to last forever. And by 1950 levels of consumption, it would have certainly lasted much longer than it has that we're dealing with now. We don't have 1950s demand levels anymore. So oil seemed like it was happily ensconced in the global infrastructure economy, and all mainly to produce things like this, cars, the American dream. And then suddenly we get these things popping in here, these objects that any 10-year-old looking at them long enough would realize that you don't really need oil, probably, to operate these things, whatever you are using. They use something a little bit different. So clearly, the national security people who were in possession of this secret, this exotic technology, implicitly all understood that by revealing this, at least right now, to the rest of the world, threatened a lot of entrenched interests. And why rock the boat? Especially when you have a lot of other intangibles, such as what would people do if you tell them about this? I mean, people don't always handle new situations very well. There is the possibility of at least some level of panic. And let's make no mistake, I'm sure many of you can relate to this. I've had so many conversations with people about the topic of UFO, ET, and so forth. And everyone's different. And some people gravitate to it very easily, and others get very frightened by it. Fear is definitely part of what we're dealing with. And in terms of giving this information to the world, if you don't really know how people are going to take it, especially if you yourself don't know everything there is about this, you might hesitate. You might want a little more information. And then there's the whole idea of the technology that comes from this. In other words, it's not simply, do we really want everyone in the world to have the free energy that is implicit in this? Sure, you couldn't probably exploit free energy in 1947 for the masses, but hey, once you let them know about it, it might not take all that many years, and the folks at the top of the human food chain might just have been wondering, do we truly want everyone to have their own personal flying saucer so they can zip around and do whatever the hell they want? How do we control them? How do we control the people? And who knows what other issues they may have been thinking of. It doesn't stop. You can make your own little checklist of them. And then ultimately, though, I think the greatest threats from this new technology could very well be, if you think back to the atomic bomb image I showed you just a few moments ago, what other weaponized technology could be adapted if you tell the world that this phenomenon is real. You'll instantly have scientists, genius scientists everywhere, people that you can't control, studying this, looking into it, and maybe one of them might just come up with an idea to blow up the Pacific Ocean, right? So there's a lot of unknown variables in such a situation. And then ultimately, as I indicated a moment ago, it's not clear if they knew whether or not they had anything to worry about anyway. There's a statement a couple of years after, I think in the early mid-50s, by Air Force Captain Edward Ruppelt. Ruppelt had run the Air Force's Project Blue Book in the 1950s for a little while. And he had said to another researcher, how could we convince the public the aliens weren't hostile when we didn't know it ourselves? It's a fair point. Because after all, through the 1950s and 60s and 70s and beyond, one of the things that is very obvious to myself as a researcher of this topic is that in addition to the fact that UFO sightings have always been of a non-stop nature, even when reports are low, there always seems to be sightings everywhere, because most people don't report their sightings. Every single day there's something going on, a lot going on. Do you know, today, if you were to go to the National UFO Reporting Center on the web, every year that site publishes roughly 4,000 or more sightings. And that's primarily English language, so U.S., North America. There are sightings going on elsewhere in the world, and not every other region has the reporting infrastructure in place where people report all of these things. But we're talking thousands upon thousands of sightings a year. That doesn't mean all of them are legitimate, true ET or black budget craft. There are such things as misidentification of ordinary phenomena. It happens. Still, there's a lot going on. But the other thing that happened in a major way in the 50s and 60s is that U.S. jets chased these things. There was trouble in paradise. These objects of unknown origin, unconventional design, extraordinary capabilities, invaded U.S. airspace with impunity, it seemed, and as often as they wanted. Zipping in, hovering, taking off, goodbye, and radar catches them, jet interceptors see them, but they can't get them. And we know this happened. This isn't speculation. We know it happened because, thankfully, we have enough released U.S. government reports that tell us it happened. And they were taken seriously. For anyone who's a true noob at this topic, I would recommend, if you really are one of those folks who is interested but doesn't know, and there's a lot of people like that, I would say go check out an article that I wrote a couple of years ago called 12 government documents that take UFOs seriously. And what I tried to do is reproduce nice high-res JPEG, you can just look at them, some of what I feel are among the best confirmed release government documents on this topic, and I wrote my own analyses of each of them. Brief. There are a number of military encounters. There are a number of statements from senior intelligence and military officials attesting to the gravity and reality of this. So go take a look, and what you find, though, is that there was a lot going on at the same time that the official statements to the public were, to the effect of nothing to see here, let's move it along, people. Keep living your lives. So there's, right from the beginning, we could see, if we want to look at this through Harry Truman's eyes, that there was a perceived need for secrecy. Now, it was their perceived need for secrecy. When you have to balance out the need to responsibly investigate and then report, okay, that's one thing, and maybe they planned that. But as we can all realize, the problem with secrecy is that it develops its own momentum and its own profitability, its own bureaucracy. And now we're 70 years into this mess. But back in the 40s, the UFO phenomenon was instrumental, I would argue, in the creation of our black budget system altogether. This is something that students of the black budget typically fail, at least openly, to acknowledge in their own research, that the UFO phenomenon is one of the core reasons that a black budget was even necessary. Think about it. If you are the president and you decide, we're going to study this, well, how do you can't tell Congress. You tell Congress, that's like telling the world. So you have to create a system that does an end run around Congress to fund it without Congress knowing. You let a couple of people in on the secret, right? But it's generally outside the normal constitutional process of getting your funding. Black budget. Layers upon layers of secrecy. The UFO phenomenon, like a number of other important secrets, is nested. Classified programs within classified programs and so on. And this is how it is. You'd also need to manage your mainstream media, which at that time was radio and newspapers, later TV. Today it includes internet to the extent possible. And how do you do that? Well, we know. There's a tremendous amount of confirmed research done on the fact that the CIA has had its hooks into mainstream media since the beginning. With the New York Times and the Post and CBS News and Reuters. It's not that the CIA controlled every single thing that went out. It's not that. It's more like they call in their chips when they need them. They've got their people strategically placed to create the right kind of spin on certain kinds of stories, to kill certain stories, to ridicule certain stories. You set the tone and the rest follow. Same with the academic and scientific communities. You can't control every single professor out there. If some young Turk speaks up his or her mind on the reality of UFOs, then what you do is you get your guy at Harvard or Princeton or Berkeley or wherever to smack them down. And that's what has also happened. They are the guard dogs herding the sheep. Well, most scholars aren't heroes. They don't want to be. They want their jobs and they want their little turf. It's an unusual person who, within those worlds, the scientific and academic worlds, are going to be willing to stand up and take the risk of losing their career over a topic like this, particularly with science when there's no funding for it publicly. All that funding's classified. And then finally, if you're setting up your secrecy organization back in the 1940s, ultimately you need your people studying this stuff. So you create your teams. You segue out the technology to various contractors who know what they're doing. It's all compartmented properly. And you've got your other team closer to you that's actually analyzing and studying all of this. If you're Truman, you might say, let's revisit this in a couple of years and decide what our plan of action will be, and we'll have all our contingency plans in place, and et cetera, et cetera. I get the feeling it might have been the case with Harry Truman. A couple of his statements in his retirement certainly attests to his own unease over the growth of the national security state. He made a very telling statement in 1963, long after he had left the White House, on the growth of the CIA. And he was clearly very distressed about that. So speaking of secrecy, you know that it's now estimated that of all U.S. government documents that exist, possibly more than half are classified in one way or another. And so if you're an archivist or a historian doing research on your government's history, you legitimately could say that more than half of your government's history is classified, is secret. That's America. And probably, I don't know for sure, but that's probably a lot of the rest of the world. If we are looking at all that, trying to gather the information to make sense of our world, it's kind of like looking at an iceberg. We all know that most of the iceberg is below the water. Most of the important information about our world is below our water. You've got your public and open sources, but the deeper you go below that water, what we find, the few good open public studies that have been done on the classified world have told us that the deeper you go, the more privatized it gets. And that within the world of special access programs, which is your primordial black budget programs, that they appear to be dominated not by DoD personnel so much as by the private contractors who pull the strings. And really, we can all see, anyone with eyes to see understands that U.S. policy, really national policy of any nation that has any significance in geopolitics, is dominated by private financial interests. And if you question this, just look at Iraq and what America has done with Iraq. No weapons of mass destruction. We kind of knew that at the time. I knew it at the time. I don't see why they wouldn't have known. When Colin Powell gave his famous speech to the UN, remember that? He had his big, just like I had, he had a much bigger presentation with all these intelligence shots, these satellite shots, and said, well, you can't tell, but trust me, our analysts tell us that these are sites of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. I got off my couch about 10 times and said, bullshit. And I did. I was so angry, because even by then, it was out that the CIA had basically been decapitated by the president because they had not been on board, and yada, yada, yada. The whole thing was a charade. Well, the point of going in there, if it wasn't for the weapons, which like 5 years later we were told was a mistake, faulty intelligence. But what actually has happened with Iraq is that in the last 5 years, the $30 trillion worth of oil has finally been sold off at fire sale prices to international multinational corporations, which was the game plan all along. And here's the real kick in the teeth to the U.S. Soldier and taxpayers paying for all this mess, is that the major corporations that got it aren't even American. They're Indonesian, Turkish, Chinese, and whatnot, which tells us all that what the U.S. military has become is essentially a security police force for international financial money. That's what it is. Yes. Anyone who's listening and who's a part of our military, I hope, understands that this is not a statement against anyone who's serving in the U.S. military. It's just how this whole system has become twisted in a way that's not in accordance with, I would assume, what we think the United States was meant to be, to defend national interests, not international moneyed interests. So that's the secrecy iceberg. The further down you go, the more privatized things get. And I suppose the most secret of, and the key point of that, let me not forget this, is that the further down that secrecy iceberg you go, you run into information that's not so much classified as it is proprietary. And that's key. The information becomes owned by private interests that makes them impervious to public inquiry. And at the bottom of that iceberg, we can say, would be as I say sometimes, them or the others. I don't like to say ETs are aliens too much. I don't really know that they're ET. I suspect that they are, but I don't know for sure. They're not in our civilization. That much I'm pretty sure of. So I call them them or the others. So now let me deal with a concept that has been in my mind for a couple of years. Let's just walk through this a little bit. What happens if, let's say, we're part of this classified world? So we're the people who are going to be studying this technology and studying the implications of who these other beings are. The whole thing, everything. And we've got total secrecy. We've got a huge amount of black budget money to play with, so there's no problem there. Lots of people with IQs of 200 on up to think about this. So what would happen? Would we have some breakthroughs in understanding in our world? Yeah, I think we would. Some of those breakthroughs clearly could be money-making breakthroughs, improvements in solid-state electronics maybe, or fiber optics, or high-tensile fibers, or other types of weapons. Yeah. And those can get segued out to industry, and you've got a great ground floor investment opportunity at that. And reducing to zero, less than zero, by the way, your incentive for giving this secret up, because you got, now the Roswell technology becomes a goose that lays golden eggs. But let's say it goes further than that, and we make breakthroughs that are not just money makers, but really revolutionary. Electrogravitics, that is anti-gravity. Energy sources that are beyond petroleum, the key. Maybe some version of Tesla tech, a variant of that. Maybe the use of maybe the zero-point energy field, or even nuclear fusion, or even cold fusion. I don't know what that answer is. But I'll bet you these scientists working in that environment got some answers. And once they did that, once they realized, wow, we don't need petroleum to go from point A to point B, at that point their bosses would say, okay, that's really great, guys. Keep studying that, but that's not ever going to get out until we say so. Because how the hell do you monetize that type of energy source? That might be difficult for them to do. And also, not just from a private greed point of view, but again, if you're thinking in terms of earthly geopolitics, you might think, look, this will give us a great advantage over whomever. So let's work on this privately. And that's what we would do. And years go by, and we build a couple of flying saucers of our own, maybe our own fleet. And then the next thing you know, that fleet's going off planet. And then the next thing you know, that fleet is, or we are encountering these other beings in ways at a level that maybe ordinary people, for the most part, aren't. So think about our mindset. Now ask yourself, what is it that constitutes a distinct civilization? It's kind of a nebulous topic or nebulous issue, I agree. But there are things. Your level of technology, I think, would have to factor into it. Your worldview, you know, how you see yourself in relationship to the universe and to the world around you. A lot of other things. And what I would suggest is that in many key aspects, this little classified group that's studying that type of technology, doing all of that, might just be legitimately characterized as a separate civilization, one that is broken away from our own, hence the idea of a breakaway civilization. I think of it as sort of an extreme version of the classified black budget world, sort of the black budget world on steroids. Just like the classified world in general, we can see it as an invisible empire, one certainly with a great deal of latitude from the official government, from oversight, congressional oversight. I mean, we already know that the world of special access programs has little to no true congressional oversight, to say nothing of the unacknowledged or so-called waived special access programs. So in this case, with an ET-related program, it's so deep, it's so expansive. The technology is so extremely advanced that they're not living our world. And I say our world, I think the world of the general public, with the vastly better technology, ability to explore areas of our world that are unavailable to most of us, and so forth, and also a significant infrastructure, a built infrastructure, much of which I think is underground, as well as elsewhere, Moon, Mars. Oh, I think that these are quite within the realm of capability. I have myself independently come across a number of reasons to think that this might be true. Can't confirm it, but certainly it looks like it could be true. So I think, yeah, this is qualifying them in a lot of ways as a separate civilization when it's broken away from our own, a breakaway civilization. It's not like they all live on Mars, I think, permanently, or the Moon permanently. I tend to think that the action is still on Earth. This is where it's all happening. Besides, I envision these individuals have families, they have people here. I'm not thinking it's exactly like Alternative 3, although there could be some element of that for all I know. That is, a permanent base elsewhere. Don't know yet. But I do think that they have a lot of leeway from the established system. And then within all of that going on, all that mess, you turn on your television or you read your newspaper or even check your AOL newsfeeder and you get all this stuff. Hey, Judge Judy, Dancing with the Stars and Monday Night Football and Fox News, Fair and Balanced. Brangelina. What's going into our heads here? Well, I think we can see what's going on. It's a 24/7 propaganda mind job it's an assault. But it's not just an assault on your higher awareness, which it is. It's a pacification. I think more than anything else, it's to keep people distracted, right? And to keep them thinking about things that are not really germane to the true reality of our world. I described last night, I brought up the analogy of Alice in Wonderland. And there's a lot to it in my view, because Wonderland, in other words, this kind of fantasy, illusory world, we actually, unfortunately, are assaulted by Wonderland every time we listen to the radio or watch television or interact with this mainstream culture that's being shoved down our throat. That's the illusion. The reality is what we truly are living. And unfortunately, most people who work 40, 50, 60-hour-a-week jobs, if they're lucky to have a job, come home, they're tired. You spend those 40-plus hours a week essentially owned by your company. Can't really do a whole lot of independent thinking. You come home tired with your people, your family, you watch a little TV, and you go to bed. Who's got time to fight the system? Very few people have time to fight that system. It's rare that an individual, has the desire, has the time, first of all, has the desire, has enough wherewithal to be able to do it, because it's hard work. I can tell you, I've devoted myself for 20 years figuring this stuff out, and I'm still not where I want to be. It's difficult. So, thanks. It's been a long, life is a strange thing. 20 years ago, I would not have expected to be doing UFO work, that's for sure. But I've never, ever regretted it. It's been very hard. You make a lot of sacrifices, but for me, there's no substitute for the freedom of pursuing the issues that I feel are the most important issues of our time. And I'm lucky in that I hopefully can continue to evolve in those interests and to continue to explore right up until and beyond I leave this mortal coil. The message, of course, that we really get on television is that you sit down and shut the hell up. You have, in this country, by the way, yes, you have the right to bitch. You can bitch all you want. What they don't want, the powers that be take a rather dim view of you acting on your private bitches. They don't want you to do anything about it, like the folks in Wall Street right now who are occupying Wall Street. They won't leave. There's like 50,000 more people. Not getting any mainstream attention, by the way. They're getting international attention, just not a whole lot of American. Little bit. I think Colbert did a piece on them. That's a blessing. That's a mixed blessing. But yeah, you have the right to bitch. You have a less of a right or privilege to do a whole lot about it. But maybe we can change that. Maybe we can become truth warriors. That's my current favorite phrase. It's really apt because truth isn't the easiest thing to find. Let's see, air conditioning. Okay, good. Whew. I didn't know what that noise was. You get paranoid. You do this long enough, you get a little jumpy sometimes. So, truth is, well, we all know, thousands of years, truth is hard to find. It really is. And in our world today, I think it's very hard to find. We call ourselves, that we live in the age of information. And that's kind of true. If you want to find out how the Mets did last night, punch that up. What's a healthier food? Bananas or Snickers bars. You can look those things up. But the age of truth, I don't know if that's the case. Finding truth behind the lies that are foisted upon us, that's much more difficult. Hello? Okay. Is this me? I mean, I am nervous and my heart is racing a little bit, but this is... Hello? No? Not yet? Yes, sir? Oh. Voila. Okay. I told you I get paranoid. And I'm cool. It's cool. You're good. All right. And this sounds just fine, doesn't it? A little more of an echoey thing. That's futuristic. In the future, everything will be echoey and chrome. Chrome is the color of the future. We know this. So, my musings on truth. Well, it's just, like in The Matrix, where you take the red pill. And I just wish it were that easy. You take one damn pill and it's all settled. You're like, oh, wow, that's how it all is. Except it doesn't work quite that easily. I took a red pill about almost 20 years ago, and I started to realize that the UFO reality was a reality. But that leads to a whole host of other questions, like, wait a minute, if that's real, how come the New York Times never, reported on this? And that gets you into studying the mainstream media's connections to this and that and the other thing. And the next thing you know, you're down that rabbit hole, and you have to take more and more red pills and rip away each new layer of illusion that's there. And as I say, I'm not done with that. So to search for truth, to obtain it, you have to be a warrior. You've got to really want to do it. You have to be conscious about doing it. It's like waking up from a dream that doesn't let you wake up. Even when you wake up, it's always possible to fall back to sleep. We have to be readily, consciously vigilant at all times in search of reality behind the illusion in our world. And toward that end, I would just take a minute to share with you my own thoughts on the necessity of caution at times in drawing our conclusions. I can tell you in my life I've been wrong about many, many things that I believed. It's easy to hold opinions. There's a saying by the deceased Robert Anton Wilson. He said, I'm going to get this right, convictions make convicts. And I think that's right. And it seems like, well, okay, if you get arrested, you're convicted, you become a convict. But what he really meant was that your convictions imprison you. You become a convict. The stronger we hold certain opinions, the more suspicious we should probably be of them. I know in my life I've been guilty many times of holding very strong opinions and then finding out, oh, wow, that really wasn't quite right. In terms of researching a topic as difficult and mysterious and just amazing as the entire topic, this is the broad stroke of UFO, ET, higher consciousness, interdimensional realities, all of that, man, that's tough. And it's even tougher when you're dealing with a group of insiders who have dominant access to mainstream media in the scientific world who are screaming at you, no, 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 or here, look at this piece of nonsense that we're pretending is true. And it's very difficult. It's like being in a hall of mirrors. So the question is, how do we know when we actually have something that's true? Well, the short answer is we probably are not always going to know. All of us need to have some comfort with the principle of uncertainty. We have to. If we are not comfortable with uncertainty, this is the wrong field to be in. We have to be prepared at certain points just to say, maybe, and be comfortable with that. I'm happy to say that I am pretty much comfortable with that position on a lot of things. In terms of research, and folks like myself and the other stellar speakers who are here this weekend, and all other researchers who are involved in this, who publish work, the one thing that I would always caution against is drawing conclusions too early based on something that your source tells you. There's a book recently that came out by the author Annie Jacobson on Area 51 in Roswell. It got a lot of attention. Much of it is a fine book, but she got a lot of attention for the statement that Roswell was actually caused by a project run by Joseph Stalin and Joseph Mengele. Now, you've heard this, I'm sure, and the rest of us had a collective say, what? When we heard that. But Annie Jacobson had a source. Oh, well, that just makes it all wonderful, doesn't it? No, it doesn't make it all wonderful. I have sources. I mean, good grief. Sources can be wrong. Sources can lie. Believe it or not. I've been lied to. Other researchers have been lied to. Sources can be wrong. They may think they have something that's correct, but you know what? Just because you're in the classified world doesn't really mean squat sometimes, because what you know is what you need to know. And if you're at a certain level, guess what? If there's something that's at a level beyond you, you will have incomplete or maybe even deceptive information yourself. This is why responsible journalists use multiple sources to confirm a fact or not. 3 at least. I think that researchers in this field of the alternative research community, we really need, this is a strong need for us to hold our standards a little higher than sometimes we do. This is not to, thank you, it's not to offer a blanket criticism, all right, because there are many people who do important work, and no one's perfect. We all make mistakes. But nonetheless, it's very important that when we are researching this, for so many reasons, it's important. A, because we are still trying to deal with the rest of humanity that may not be on board with what we're all about. And we need to keep our game at the highest level possible. But also for internal dialogue amongst ourselves. It becomes very, very difficult to sort things out when like 30% of it could be just complete fabrication or wrong. It becomes very difficult. We need to hold ourselves to the highest standards possible. And along these lines, I'm just hoping that we will, at some point in the near future, pass the phase of incessant predictions of what is going to happen next week, next month, next year, on such and such a date. Look, nothing wrong with looking into the future. I do it. I'm about to do it on the next frame. But I don't like to pin myself down into specific dates. That's usually a losing game. It was only a year ago at this time that we were supposed to experience the Project Bluebeam event. Remember Project Bluebeam? Yes, you do. It didn't happen. I went on the record a week or two before it happened. I wrote an article that said, it's not going to happen, folks. Hey, I was right on that prediction. Now, having said that, yes, I'm going to make a prediction. Disclosure of the UFO ET reality will happen. As impossible as it is, it will happen. It will happen, and I'll tell you why. Sometimes I like to phrase this as a paradox. Disclosure is impossible, but it's inevitable. And we can all see why it's impossible, really, because the people with this secret, what's their motivation? They have no motivation for giving this up. They have too much to lose from their point of view. But it will happen because, fortunately for us, they're not the only part of that equation. There are the secret keepers, yeah. Let's not forget there are these other beings. They're part of this equation. But then there's us, our civilization, which is really on the fast track in so many ways. I mean, think about it. There's been no era like this one that we're in right now. I can't even almost imagine future tech, say, 20 years from now. Remember 1991? Gosh, 1981. That was like the Dark Ages. I don't know. I think the computers in that year, you had to take two pieces of flint and strike them together like this to start them up. That was 1981. It's 30 years ago. Internet, no internet, no. You had a corporate media that really had a stranglehold over our minds. Think about 1981. Even cable was like hard. I don't think there was much cable TV. TV program was pretty universally awful and mindless. A lot has changed, actually, in the last 30 years. And it's changed because fundamentally of a technological revolution that has enabled us as a world to have a global conversation or a series of global conversations that just were not possible 30 years ago. They're possible now, and they're happening now, and that does affect, there's that word, consciousness. That's a word that I often avoid only because I sometimes feel it gets overused, misused, but it is important. Our awareness, our consciousness is affected and is in the process of change along with the technologies that are helping to drive that. When I think about where we're going to be in even 10 years from now, 20 years from now, in terms of the changes that we're going through, it's very difficult. But one thing I enjoy for fun is reading what computing experts and AI, artificial intelligence experts, have to say about our future. It's funny, when I tell someone who's got a mainstream point of view, I say, if you think UFOs are whack, just read some good books by AI experts. And those guys get funding, serious funding sometimes, for what they do. And most of them are in agreement that, in another generation from now, computers will have relative IQs that will be much higher than the average human. Whether they're conscious or not is a different issue, but they may seem like it. You'll be able to have entire conversations with your computer, but your computer will have an IQ of like 500. What else will be possible? What portable devices will we have in our hands or in our brains that will allow us to interface with each other? I don't know. And in that kind of a situation, what will be the likelihood that we will have tools available to ourselves to prove, and I mean prove once and for all, and share the data that there are other intelligences that are here? Our capabilities are just incomprehensible to those of a century ago, the generation of World War I. Could you imagine how they would react in this world of ours today, what they would see? Well, similarly, just another 20, 30 years from now, I believe we're going to be seeing more and more of this, and that's going to drive something. And when it happens, it's going to be fast. So this is one thing that I feel very confident in saying, is that the moment of disclosure is going to be a very sudden event. Why do I say that? Because when you talk about rapid change in human civilization, that's the French Revolution there. Even 1 year before, in 1788, who would have thunk it? France had been ruled by a divine right monarchy for centuries. Centuries. L'état c'est moi. Right? I am the state, century after century, and suddenly, boom, It's all gone. The Russian Revolution, similarly. The Tsar, the institution of the Tsar was divine right for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. The Tsar was like a god, and people prayed to the Tsar. They were icons. And instantly, within months, gone. Family assassinated. Berlin and the fall of communism in general was not predicted. The Berlin Wall's breaching was not predicted even 6 months before it happened, even 3 months, maybe 3 months was about the beginning. When Hungary opened their borders to the west, I think it was probably when we could see the writing on the wall. That was in, I think, July. Tough to predict these things. And when it happens, whammo, fast, fast, fast. And, oh, hey, man, who's this dude? Ja, ich war dabei. I was at the Berlin Wall back in 1989, one of the most electrifying moments of my life. Rapid change in our world today. That's Egypt. It's happened in Tunisia, Libya, all that mess. It's happening in Syria. Oh yeah, that's a big one. Yemen, Palestine. This is not over. And sure, we all know, okay, that intel ops are working in this. Everyone's trying to position themselves to manage these events. But never forget, for an instant, that is the people there. And the people in those countries discovered that they have a voice. And millions of light bulbs went on, boom, just like this, when they understood that we do not have to take this anymore. Never forget that. It's very easy, thank you. It's very easy to get cynical about this. Yes, of course the CIA is involved trying to manage events, obviously. Obviously other intel agencies are working behind the scenes to make this, to kind of guide this the way they want. But the voice of the people is there. That's a reality. And that's not done. That's only the beginning. This is only the beginning. Now, let me ask you this. Is it possible that we can see similar rapid change now regarding the UFO ET revelations that I think are going to happen? And of course, I think you know my answer. It's yes. Absolutely. The question will be verifying the reality of this. In other words, to force disclosure, because it's never going to happen voluntarily. It's got to be forced. There's got to be a sufficient weight of evidence to make it happen. Right now on YouTube, look, we can just go and search out hundreds, thousands of videos of alleged UFOs. There's one, that's hoax. That was from London, supposedly, just last summer. I remember watching it thinking, wow, that's a good one. It was CGI. It was a really creative, sneaky company. They did a great job with this one. The thing is, there are lots of good UFO videos on YouTube. Many, I think, are genuine. Some are not. Every single week, I get multiple emails asking, Rich, what do you think about this video? Take a look at this. And I look at it, and I'm like, wow, that looks pretty good. That one doesn't look too good. I mean, basically, what am I going to do? How can I really know? I'm no better at looking at some of these videos than any of you. I study them a lot. Sometimes I notice things, sure. But the key is with any of them, they're really not valuable in terms of public policy until they get independent verification, investigation. That's hard work. And some of them do get that. It is possible to investigate, of course. We have to continue to do our best job of that. But YouTube by itself just isn't cutting it. I think we're all seeing that. Same with whistleblowers, by the way. And I think we need as many whistleblowers as possible to have the courage to come up and talk about the experiences that they've had behind that black budget wall. But the issue has always got to be, for these claims to get traction, is we've got to find a way of independent verification. Without that, what we have are a lot of stories. Good stories, probably true stories in many cases, but without independent confirmation, without that verification, it's probably not going to go very far. Even something like a deathbed statement from an important person. might have an effect, and then again, it might not. I mean, like, I don't know, George Herbert Walker Bush. Okay, if George Bush, on his deathbed, you know, how it'd be like, people, UFOs are real at this particular juncture. Okay, and then, so let's just say that happens, right? Hey, that wasn't too bad, right? That would be cool. Not that he's dead. No, I'm not saying it's cool that he's dead. I'm just saying it would be cool if he were to make such an acknowledgement. You listening, President Bush? Yes.
That depends whether reptiles die.
Yeah, well, right. There you go. Do the reptiles die? Does he just take the body of his son? Has he already done that? I don't know. Or Obama. Who knows? I don't know. You know, it's funny. Bush, Elder, and Bill Clinton are very close friends. If you haven't, you know, if you're still stuck in the Republicans versus Democrats nonsense, they don't buy into that. That's all for show, of course. Yeah, Bush Senior and Clinton are very close friends. Crazy as it sounds. But if he were to make a statement in his, you know, standing and in his sound body and mind and so forth, that would be something indeed. That would be something. That would be powerful. Or Colin Powell or some you know, prestigious individual like that. But even then, that's not a slam dunk. People can be discredited. Even powerful insiders can be discredited if they need to be. But there are events that can force it. If I were to put my money down on two, I would say a WikiLeaks type of disclosure would be one to force this issue. Hey, it was WikiLeaks that really started the whole Arab Spring. It was the spark. People don't always remember this, but everyone knew, for example, that the Tunisian government was depraved and corrupt. But until the WikiLeaks State Department cables were thrown out there, it was then that it was like right in our face. And Tunisians weren't too happy about that. One young man who was out of hope set himself ablaze. And that's what started the whole Arab uprising. WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks didn't exist 10 years ago because it couldn't exist 10 years ago. We didn't have the technological global infrastructure to make it possible. It's possible now. Guess what? Here it is. Will there be new versions, better versions of that in the future, in the next 10 years? I wouldn't rule it out. And then, of course, there's always the possibility of a mass sighting that does it. Yes, I was just talking about the difficulties of relying on YouTube. But look, we are about a couple of years away from almost all of us having our own little high-def smartphones with high-def video, Zoom capability. I mean, it's happening. It's going to happen. It's inevitable that one sighting hits the sweet spot. You know, enough people capture it, put it up there. It gets local media attention because remember, local media there is still leeway. There's still some freedom in local media. It does happen. National media is a lot more difficult, but it's absolutely possible. Count on it that a sighting or an event happens that forces this issue. Something will do it. And I would never want to forget the likelihood of insider maneuvering, insider leaks. You know, we're 60, 70 years into the UFO cover-up, the active cover-up as I see it. Every decade after World War II, there were always moments when it looked like that secret might end. There's always maneuverings on the inside. Going back to ancient Rome, they had their divisions, their elites competing with each other, and we have it today. And within this secrecy cabal, all the indications that have come through private channels are that, yeah, there are factions even among those people who are in the know. They don't all believe that this secret has to be kept indefinitely. Now, if they're at the very apex of power, I don't know, because that I haven't gleaned. But certainly the mid-level management, I think that there's enough dissatisfaction that things can happen. And I will just say, you know, Bill Ryan really put me on the spot. Thanks, Bill. Richards may just give some of his great inside information to you. Well, I don't know how far I'm going to go with this, but I will just say to you that, yes, of course, I've been in communication with a number of individuals, just like any researcher, who has explosive information to share. And yes, I have some of that as well. And my problem has always been, how do you confirm these things? How do you confirm I will say that the scenario that has come to me, here's what I think it looks like, is that you've got multiple human groups trying to deal with this. They don't all play nice with each other, just like in any intelligence community. They don't all share information with each other. At the same time, there are multiple non-human groups that are here interacting with us because right now, as I say, Earth is where the action is. Humanity is where it's at. Why? Because we're about to leap into their world. See, they all know this, and they're watching us very carefully right now. This is a scenario as I think it's happening. And that the human groups do not all feel that they are on top of this situation, trying to manage these other entities and beings that are here, because apparently some of these other beings may not be playing nice with us either. Some of them do, and some of them I think don't. And getting a hold of all of this is difficult, hence the need to, is it a secret clandestine Cold War? Well, yeah, maybe. That might be what it is. You know, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys in this? That's a tough one to know. It helps to have a scorecard, and I don't have a very good scorecard myself. But I think that there's a lot going on. It does involve control over technology, control over science, and mastery of space-time itself. Time is important in this program. That, I believe, is the case. And toward that end, when we talk about military abductions, what I believe has happened, you know, typically we understand military abductions happen to people who have been abducted by the ETs and the military's doing their counter-intel. What did you learn from this and that? Well, that's part of it, but that's not really the whole thing. More important part of it, I think, is using people who have intense psychic gifts. Everyone's got psychic gifts. I firmly believe this. But it's like with music capabilities. Not everyone's Mozart, right? And some people have truly gifts that are whoa. And those people are coveted, I think, by every group, human and non-human alike, because they have abilities, A, to do intelligence work, to divine the motives of these other beings to some extent, and maybe even to do more. There's manipulation, I say. It's not just human capabilities. It's human capabilities mixed with technology that I think is what's going on. Can I prove this? No, I cannot prove any of it. Cannot prove any of it. But I will say that, I'm sorry?
I just want to say that as a person who's had those contacts,
Yes?
I completely agree with that statement.
Okay, thank you. I can't see you, but I'd like to talk with you when you have an opportunity.
It's Miriam.
Oh, Miriam, yes. We will talk, Miriam. So in that world, my strong feeling is that, yeah, there are people there who are actually on our side. And there are other people who are not on our side. So it's complicated. But something's going to happen, guys. It's going to happen, and when it happens, that's when the lies get really fun and really interesting. Because, I mean, think about being the president. Holy crap. I mean, we all think, and, you know, I absolutely want disclosure. I want the truth. But I'm not under an illusion that this is going to be a fun ride. If you were the president and you had to tell the world that this is real, first of all, you've got to get briefed because they've been keeping you in the dark too. That is absolutely the case. Black budget world, a breakaway civilization. How much do they really think the president is told about this? The president's job is not to run this. The president's job is to kiss the babies, shake the hands of the dignitaries. He's the sales rep of the, I was going to say of the country, but really the sales rep of international money. And he's got to sell you two things, by the way. He's got to sell you whatever new war comes down the pike, and he's got to sell you the bitter pill of globalization. And if he does that well, he's done his job, whether his name is George W. Bush, or Barack Obama, or anyone else. That's what they do. So now, suddenly, though, he's in a position where he's got to brief you on this awesome reality. He's got to get information. He's going to find himself in a difficult situation because people, it's like, you know, have you tried to become half pregnant ever? Not that easy to do. How do you half disclose something like this. You give a little bit of information. Yes, my understanding is there's an extraterrestrial presence here. You can't just walk away from the podium, try as you might. There are follow-up questions. And your job, what if you learn something that really is unsettling? I mean, honestly. How do you tell the world that? You may not want to do it. You may have to do it, but you may not want to do it. And you may need, just like Harry Truman probably wanted to 60 plus years ago, is stall. You may stall for time and also get the spin machine in high gear. Because look, the CIA is just not going to walk away from the table just because this comes out. They've been working all these years to manage this. They're not just going to stop at the moment of the recognition that ETs are here. They're going to try to continue to manage it. And it's going to be our job at that moment to really take the fight. But the advantage that we'll have now is that a lot of these questions that are off the table now will be on the table publicly. First question that people are going to want to ask is, who are they, what are they, and do we have anything to worry about? That's going to be a tough one. Follow-up questions are going to be, whoa, how did you keep this secret all these years? What does that say about the structure of our society, the structure of power, the manipulation of our mainstream media, our academic community, by the intelligence world, all of that stuff? That's coming out. That's explosive, to say the least, obviously. And then, of course, well, what kind of secret toys do we have? What's our tech? What's our energy situation in that world? Wow. And then, ultimately, what do we do? Yes, people will be looking for leadership because they're going to be so caught off guard by this. They're not going to know what to do. Panic is an absolute possibility among many people. Of course, you can't run around in circles pulling the hair out of your head forever. You're going to have to settle down at some point and deal with the reality, but there's going to be a lot of upset people for sure. Well, answering the question, who are they? I don't know myself, really, the full answer. My suspicion is that we're dealing with multiple groups, but are they all ET? Are they all interdimensional? Whatever even that means. Now, I don't say that lightly. Yes, I think we can understand there are dimensions of reality, but do we truly understand? Do I understand it? I don't really think I do fully. But somehow, yes, they seem to have an ability to play in and go in and out of our dimensions. Are they a lost human civilization? An ancient breakaway civilization? Ah, there's a possibility. Are they intelligent machines themselves or the product of intelligent machines? Don't rule that out. We're getting into an era ourselves where we will have hyper-intelligent machine intelligence that might be able to manipulate DNA with nanotech in ways that who knows what they can create even a century from now, what we'll be able to do. Maybe they've done that. Are they able to flit in and out of our time stream in some way? Do they look just like us? By the way, I think the answer to that is yes, some of them do look just like us. But ultimately, a question that any responsible leader is going to have to deal with is, how will we know what they are? In other words, just because they tell us something doesn't mean that it's actually the case. We are going to be in a difficult position as a society at that moment of disclosure, because I guarantee you, we may have a sufficient ability to know that they are here, but that doesn't mean we'll be at the level of knowing exactly everything about them. And the arguments will begin because we all go into this with our own preconceived ideas. Whether we think that these other beings are higher dimensional, beneficent entities here to help us move to our next level of where we're supposed to be as a civilization or as a species, or whether they're demonic Luciferian elements that are here to deceive us and enslave us. There's not much middle ground between those extreme positions, and they will not go away post-disclosure. The debates, the cultural wars will not cease. They will accelerate and accentuate. Ditto understanding their intentions is kind of the same package. Are they good guys? Are they bad guys? Are they indifferent? It's really the bottom line that people will want to know. And again, that's tough for a public policy person to have to deal with. If you go through the UFO research literature, there's reasons to side with all of these answers. Certainly there are many cases where there's clearly beneficent interactions that people have had with these other entities, and there have been quite a few bad interactions as well, and not all on the human side, by the way. There's reasons to think that they don't really give much of a hoot about us, at least in terms of the way they seem to ignore a number of the observers. Who knows? It's hard to know exactly what they think. Do they want our DNA? It looks like some of them do. Do they want our bodies and souls? Well, maybe. Do they want our world? Maybe they live on our world. That's been my position for a while. I think some of them just live here. They have their own built infrastructure, probably below ground, or maybe even among us, right? At that moment of disclosure, the stuff is going to hit the fan. Yeah, that's a picture of Tahrir Square, but we'll see that writ large in many places, especially the U.S., I think. People will not be satisfied with little sops here and there like, well, there's a situation here, people, and we're doing our best to get on top of it, and I'll give you updates as I get them. People are going to be like, really? We really don't want to wait for your answers. We want your answers now. There's going to be a lot of angry people. People protesting outside or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or the Pentagon or Area 51, S4. Hey, you know, Wackenhut might be able to stop 10, 20 people going into S4, but can they stop 1 million? Maybe not. Of course, maybe they, you know, there's all kinds of crowd control weaponry that they would undoubtedly want to employ, but the point is that things would get very escalated very fast. And would very, very much threaten to spin out of control from the point of view of the powers that be. And then, of course, think about this now. Once this reality is out on the table, you know all the other questions are going to be on the table too. 9/11, JFK, which seems so far away, and it is, but it'll come back up as an issue because it is important. Chemtrails, underground bases, HARP. People are going to say, you lied about this. Let's take a look at all these others because we know you lied about those too. And of course they did lie about those other things. So suddenly you have a situation that spirals, that threatens to spiral out of control. Again, think about being, say, the president of the U.S. in that situation. So how do we get answers? Well, I don't think it will be the easiest thing to twist answers out. Disclosure, as I've often said, is not the end of anything. It's the beginning of the real phase of the battle for truth, the battle of being truth warriors. Because truth works in several stages. You have to learn it. That's hard enough. Then you have to act on it. And that's sometimes harder still. And that's where we're going to be at. And not only that, but in a post-disclosure setting, there are other deep problems that we have right now in this world that are not just going to wash away. They're not just going to disappear, and they are going to be part of this mix. Let me explain what I mean here. First of all, the issue of global wealth. We all know this is really horrible, right? If the world were this room of 100 people, and all of the money in the world equaled $100, one person owns 40 of those dollars. One person owns 40 of those dollars. You may think that's not fair, or you may think it's fine, whatever. The bottom 50 people share $1. That's our world right now. Okay? And this is a world that's got political systems, economic systems, financial, all these institutions, all these things that make it go. Who's going to be in the best position to manipulate and manage all of those institutions for his benefit? Well, that's a question that answers itself. It's that one guy with the $40. The way it really works, as I have often seen now, we've got a 4-class world. Top 1%, let's call them the owner class, because they own all the stuff. There's the 1% after them, the second percentile, that owns another 10% of all wealth. So the top 2% own 50% of all the wealth in this world. And that's a conservative estimate, by the way. I would bet you it's higher. It's certainly higher within the U.S., a little bit higher. Then you've got the bottom 2 classes. I call them the worker bees and the expendables. No human being is expendable, you understand. In the context of this global system, though, they are. The worker bees are the, well, first of all, the second percentile, I call them the managers. They're like the guard dogs that keep the herd in place. That's what they are. Because they have a stake in the system, maintaining it, of course. The worker bees are like skilled labor, like most of us, really. You know, you go to college, you get a degree, get your job, you do your thing, requires a lot of intelligence, and you got to do that. Yes, you're trained. That's why you get your dollar. In the whole grand scheme, they get, on average, about $1 each. That's not too bad. Hey, you know, be happy with it, man. And then the people at the bottom get an average of 2 cents. They're the expensive. That's the unskilled labor in this world. And from the point of view of the guys on top, they could drop dead. I don't think they would care, except for the fact that their existence is important because it gets these two bottom groups fighting with each other. So that they don't really ask the fundamental question, who owns what? Which is what our world is about. Every 4 years, this society has these things in our country we call elections, in which candidates are put into place. And the question that is never asked, of course, is who owns what. That's going a little too far. They talk about all the unresolvable, nonsensical issues. So another, you know, George Orwell, if you haven't read 1984, one of the greatest books of the 20th century, Orwell really saw it as well. He, in his characterization of the world as he saw it, the very top of the power structure was less than 2%. They were the inner party. The outer party would be like the manager class. And then 85% of the population, he called them the proles. He kind of combined those two bottom classes that I was just showing you. In that world, it's necessary to have a surveillance state to keep those people in line, and of course all the propaganda to brainwash them. So my question, in a post-disclosure scenario, will that inequality, will that social stratification go away? I don't want to answer that just yet, but think about it. We have another problem that's very, very significant in a post-disclosure world, because it's significant right now, and that's human population. This is, if you've seen these graphs, you know, human population, 10,000 BC to 5,000, it grew steady, but then suddenly, in the last, say 2.5 centuries, right up off the charts. That, my friends, is not sustainable. I don't care what you're talking about, whether it's viruses or people or food production. That can't happen indefinitely. Something is going to have to change that. Something is going to cause that either to go down or, hopefully, if we're lucky, flatline. We're not on that trajectory, that's for sure. The estimated global population by, I think, 2050 is supposed to be 10 billion people. The reason I'm mentioning global population right now is because it's intimately connected with the global eco-disasters that we are currently dealing with. Water crises are endemic around the world. China and India are primed for some serious water issues. We've got them here in this country. Water wars are ahead. That is a photograph of the Aral Sea. Well, what once was the Aral Sea, that used to be the 4th largest body of fresh water in the world. In the last 20 years, so this is a picture of it. In the last 20 years, the Aral Sea has lost the equivalent of Lake Erie plus Lake Ontario, all that volume. Think about that. That's 100% human-created disaster. The Soviets, by the way, knew damn well what they were doing, and they just didn't give a damn. They knew their irrigation program was destined to destroy that body of water. And there you have it. But guess what? This type of destruction is going on with many of our large bodies of water in the world today. Not just, that's the most extreme and worst example, but there are others. In all the continents. And why? Because, well, we're just putting too much strain on water tables and fresh bodies of water. That's the problem. Deforestation is causing not only the destruction of species, but it is also causing climate change, all in the production of your hamburger. Okay? This is not even just an energy thing. This is a land use thing. Human consumption. We're like termites gobbling up the whole world. It's causing some problems. There's a phenomenon called coral bleaching. Coral and algae are symbiotic. They need to be together. But what happens is that when coral gets stressed, they expel the algae. That's why they look white, hence bleaching. That's a bad, bad thing. Because when the corals get bleached like this, it leads to deaths of an entire region of an ocean. And why is coral bleaching happening in much of the world? Well, there's a lot of triggers that cause it. Not all of them are higher temperatures, but that's the primary one that scientists are pointing to. In other words, climate change in the oceans are affecting this and causing some serious eco-problems. There's the fishing problem. We're stressing out the global fish stocks big time, all right? And because of fishing methods like this, because we just can't get enough of it. Species extinction, there's a lot of debate over how fast it's proceeding, but everyone knows it's happening fast. Probably, the conservative estimates I've heard is that it's 1,000 times higher than the normal rate of species extinction. Say goodbye to every one of those species. They're probably going to be gone in the next 50 years. Is it a surprise that we're dealing with a global food crisis? Of course it's not surprising. We're stressing out the entire world. There's almost 7 billion of us. No. Colony collapse disorder. I have an apple tree in my backyard. I got no apples this year. I didn't see any bees this year either. Okay? You need bees to have apples. You need bees to grow so much of the food, and they're being stressed out. By us. We know it's happening by us. We're doing bad things. Tonight, 1 billion people in this world are going to go to bed hungry. And in the time that it took me to say that, 2 children just died of starvation. That's our world. The price of food is reaching an all-time high in modern era, at least, right now. And you know what? Global demand for food is expected to double in the next 50 years. How are we going to do that? In an AD world, this is going to be on the table. It's not going away. Then there's nuclear issues. Good grief. Should I even bother? Fukushima is not done. We know that. And the radioactive waste of nuclear products, nuclear waste, the half-life of nuclear waste, that stuff goes forever. How are we going to deal with all that? And just like it's not surprising we're dealing with a food crisis, is it surprising we're dealing with a global financial meltdown? By the way, Wall Street had their worst week in 3 years since Lehman Brothers tanked. In September of 2008, Wall Street just had a horrible week. The euro is like this, teetering, ready to go. We're in some trouble. When the Great Depression started with the crisis of 1929, that lasted more than a decade. Okay? And our crisis is primed to last a long time. It could certainly be in the works when there's a moment of disclosure. Don't think that won't affect matters. Where that's going to end up. So, back to the moment of disclosure. One of the reasons that I co-authored AD After Disclosure is to give a vision of how I think things could be. It doesn't have to be a dark road. It could be a good road. There are opportunities here. All right? A president who's on the spot. Yes, he's been put into power by those secret keepers, by the Illuminati, breakaway civilization, Bilderberg group, financial elite. They put him there, or they put her there if she gets in a few years. Who knows? Maybe Hillary will give it a run. Probably not. Whenever this happens, the president is going to be on the spot. And here's the opportunity. Does the president side with his paymasters? Or does the president see an opportunity actually to do the right thing? Is it possible? And of course it's possible. Of course it's possible. You side with the people. And here's what I mean. There's an opportunity here for a president to make a point to reclaim authority over the sprawling black budget world that has gotten out of control, that is out of the control of the U.S. people and the world, and to make a point here. It is possible for a president to lead a global consensus to create a new beginning, a new federalism for the 21st century, to rein in the culture of runaway secrecy, to promote democratic, publicly owned, publicly shared systems of global resource use. I know that's a mouthful, but you can get the idea. And probably most importantly, to promote a unified global legal system to make corporations behave. We don't have that now. Corporations span nations, they span the globe. They are more powerful than almost any country that they inhabit. They're like the big dog that's peeing on everyone's tree, and there's nothing to restrain them. We are at a point in our world where we must have such a system in place. It is necessary. Thank you. That is not saying a, Bilderberg, one world government, fascist style. But if you don't like globalization, well, I'm sorry, you're living in the wrong millennia. Globalization has been happening for the past 500 years at least. Since Columbus set foot on the New World, it's been happening. We are intertwined, interdependent. Whether we like it or not, that's just the way it is. So the question is not, is globalism happening? Sorry, it is. The question is, what's it going to look like? Will it look like fascism, or will it look something like freedom? That's our choice, and we can make it look like freedom. But it's got to be done on a global scale. It's got to be done with enough centralized authority that is responsible to people. That's a tricky game to play. We all know. What other options are there? A global federalist system. The U.S. did it on a national basis over 2 centuries ago. It can be done globally. That includes a safe transition away from a petroleum-based society. That means control of the proliferation of the dangerous technology and weaponry that undoubtedly is implicit in the UFO reality. That's a tricky subject to get into. I don't have every answer on that, but it's going to have to be confronted. And implementing solutions to our global disasters that are confronting us now. And these are problems that are not just going to melt away instantly with disclosure or with higher consciousness, and I'll get into that in just a minute. They will remain. They will take years and probably centuries to deal with, but we can do it. Okay? We need patience, we need persistence. That's the name of the game. How do we do it? Well, if you look at our society now, I don't really see it happening yet. Everyone knows that there are all these issues, these environmental catastrophes that we're dealing with, and it's still happening. But something can happen. Something can happen. And that's disclosure, you see? This is why it's so important. Because if there's one event that will force the world to wake up all of a sudden, it's that event. It's that event in which billions of people will suddenly ask themselves, oh, I've been wasting my whole life. There are these other entities here. Let's get my game up to the, what's that, a couple of minutes left? Good, 2 minutes, thank you. Let's get my game up. And that's important. That will spark, I believe, a new global conversation. So can we have a better world? Yes, we can have a better world. Believe it and work for it. It needs belief and it needs effort. It can happen. I'm not much of a utopian, I will tell you right now. I am an idealist. I freely admit that. I'm suspicious of the get-out-of-jail-free card syndrome that I sometimes hear, that it's all going to be great. Well, it can be good. It can be great. Will it be great? That's up to us. Will there be corporations in a post-disclosure world? Well, I think probably. Of course, we can take the right path and manage them and make them behave. I think we can try to do that. Will it be the end of money? Well, if you've got corporations, if you've got an economy, as long as we've got these physical bodies and we need to eat food and we need to interact with each other, I assume we're going to have corporations, we're going to have money. Will there be the end of social stratifications and inequality? I'm a little doubtful. Who knows? Higher consciousness. Now here it gets interesting. Yes, I think there will be. But what do I mean by that? Well, there's a couple of ways to look at consciousness. For those of you who don't know, if I have a spiritual philosophy, it would be that of Zen. I'm not Buddha, believe me. I'm no Zen master either. But I do believe in that state of mind, that it is an attempt to strip as many illusions away as possible. And that's an ongoing thing. No one's perfect at it. I'm certainly not. But it comes down to awareness and waking up. That's why I love the name of this conference, Awake and Aware. That's a very Zen thing to say. Wake up from your dream. It takes effort to stay awake all the time. It's easy to fall back to sleep. But I think that a moment of disclosure does have great potential in triggering a high level of awakeness and awareness among humanity. And that's a very good thing. Whether we perceive these others as a threat or as beneficent or as a little bit of both, it will wake us up, which we need to do. We need to wake up as a society, as a species. Now, there's another kind of higher consciousness. Will something inside us turn on to an even higher level in which we can perceive other realities that are maybe less available to us in our ordinary reality? I'm going to leave that to some other speakers. I don't know. I don't have a final opinion on that. I do think it's possible. Look, first of all, one thing we know of this phenomenon is that it interacts with our minds. There is a definite interaction between the human mind and these beings, these things. It happens all the time. They get into our heads. There's something about human consciousness that's very important in all of this. Absolutely. And so will that consciousness be elevated in a post-disclosure world? I think the answer is maybe. Is it a definite slam dunk? I would say not a slam dunk. Not a slam dunk. But it's possible. So what I would suggest for all of us in approaching this very difficult but very challenging time ahead is no fear. Fear is not our friend, and no fantasy. Let's look at things with what is called in Zen beginner's mind. That is, don't let us go in with preconceived ideas or hopes or fantasies or fears about how things will be. We're better than that. We can face reality. Whatever that reality brings to us, we can do it. You know, I go through periods where I just get so frustrated with humanity and myself. I'm no better. But then I have moments where I really do believe that we have such extraordinary capabilities inside us. It's a gift, but it's also something that forces responsibility for most of us. Yeah, baby, shift happens. I believe we're at that point. Historians 500 years from now will probably look back at our time and they'll say, yeah, that's when it happened. Now, of course, will it happen in 2012? Look, change, in my view, doesn't happen overnight like that. When Rome fell in 476, Honorius is replaced by the barbarian Germanic king. It's not like Romans at the time said, oh, okay, Roman Empire's over, let's all go. No, they didn't realize. It didn't happen like that. It took centuries before people realized, oh yeah, no more Roman Empire. Change doesn't happen dramatically, frequently. It happens over time. Historical change is not usually like flipping a switch. Now, with disclosure, that might be as close as we get, that's true. But there's a lot of other things going on besides disclosure in this world. There's the transformation of ourselves technologically and, yes, in our very being that's happening. And 2012 is as good a year as any, possibly, when historians from the future look back and see that. But it could be 2020, or it could be 2015. I don't really know. But we are living through it. These changes are happening. I would not really want to predict every single thing that's going to happen, but I think we can assume that it's going to be dramatic. And one thing that I won't really explore, because I am essentially out of time to get into new issues, but think about what the response of these other beings might be, whoever, whatever they are, whether they're the reptoids or the greys or the Norwegian supermodels. We want to know. We want to know. Will they? What would really be kind of a bummer, honestly, is continued aloofness. That's the one thing. Just because we've outed them doesn't mean that they are going to be outed or want to out themselves. Nothing is for certain. And that might be the at least initial moment of irony, and I am wrapping this up here. The possibility that after disclosure, we may not, for quite some time, have all of the answers that we would like to have. In other words, it might take a long time to work through this new reality, these new revelations. Generations will probably pass. People do have an ability to change, but more than people are generations. You know, someone who's grown up with certain beliefs in their life, well, we can change a certain level, but the ones who really change are our children, our grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. They grow up with realities that are very different And that's where it happens. So I think true change is going to take a little more than 5, 10, 20 years. It's going to take a long time. But it's going to happen. And at the end of that road, let's say a century from now, we're going to have a very different world. A better world? It could be a better world. We will have a world that will still be dealing with environmental repercussions of what we're doing right now. That's going to be very difficult to get out of that. But we could at least, a century from now, be in the process of remediating some of this damage. Human society is going to be very different. It will be alien to us, just like our society would seem very alien to someone of 100 years ago. Humanity itself could very well be different. Whether on a purely spiritual level, if we've moved on to another level, well, maybe. I'm not so completely sure of that, but certainly on a technological level, giving a boost to certain capabilities that we inherently have, we may indeed be very different. We'll have an open acknowledgement of other beings that are interacting with us, I think that's for sure. And so a lot of the questions that we are asking will be answered. Others won't. And there will be new questions, there will be new challenges, and yeah, there will be new problems. There's no free ride here. You know, our existence is always going to be fraught with challenges, and it should be. Who wants to just party all night long? I enjoyed partying with some of you last night, but look, to make a life interesting and to make a life worthwhile, we need challenge. And we need new things to expand our own reality, our own consciousness. There's that word. Well, those are my websites. Those are my books. I really would like to thank you. I've had a great time being out here with you today. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will be available. I'll be here gladly to talk with all of you all week. All you have to do is come up to me, and I'll be at my table in a couple of minutes if you want to chat with me then too. So thanks a lot.
I just want to say, wow. I just want to say that Rich will also be part of our panel discussion late tonight, around 8:30 after the dinner hour. We're having a panel discussion with all the speakers, and we can then address some of the things he said here. I really wish we had time for a question and answer session right this minute, but we don't. Thank you, Rich, for some wonderful, stimulating ideas here, and I'm going to challenge you on a few of them tonight.